This video was mainly sparked by a debate in the comments of my Brand New Day review that was about Iron Man and Civil War. It made me want to make a video about it because I do think my take is a bit unique, as it talks about the logistics of why Iron Man did what he did rather than the plot of the movie. And that conversation solidified what I believe to be a character assassination for Steve Rogers in the MCU, and makes him nearly irredeemable in my eyes, if I'm being honest with you. It makes me not really care about him being brought back in Doomsday. After rewatching the movie, I think Iron Man was right in Civil War, and was put between a rock and a hard place politically. He's completely justified in playing ball with the governments of the world, but still trying to tell the team they can ignore them if they feel like they need to, which makes Steve's objections feel childish and naive to me. It kind of makes sense because he's mentally being brought back into this place of like when he was 18 and joining the war, because this is the last connection to the past that he has that is still alive, and is actively being hunted down due to the Accords. However, this doesn't really change that Steve just says no to signing because of Bucky, not because of any principles that they claim that he has. The Avengers are functionally a PMC group that considers their borders of operation the entire world. In this movie, the inciting incident is them killing a bunch of foreign nationals without any supervision, chasing down an international super terrorist that's technically an ex-American soldier who is also running around without supervision and just doing whatever he wants. The world sees this and basically wants checks on heroes and is asking America to put a leash on their citizens that can flatten entire districts and actively go around doing that. The film doesn't delve into these topics too deeply because of the greater conspiracy, but what's there is enough to extrapolate the ideas and concepts that I go over in this video and that I just mentioned. I don't think that I'm writing the script for the writers. Hey, I'm trying to get to 500 subscribers by the end of the year, currently halfway there. So if you like the video so far, then please subscribe. My packaging isn't good, but YouTube keeps pushing my content with thousands of impressions, and I'm just not generating a lot of clicks. As one of the lucky few to click on a poorly packaged video, then subscribe. Leave a comment telling me how to improve the thumbnails and other things like that. It will be greatly appreciated. Now back to the video.
We need to be put in check. Whatever form that takes, I'm game. If we can't accept limitations, we're boundaryless, we're no better than the bad guys.
Sorry, Steve, that is dangerously arrogant. This is the United Nations we're talking about. 117 countries want to sign this. 117, Sam, and you're just like, no, it's cool.
But I mean, yeah, he's kind of right here. In the movie, Iron Man says that they can ignore the Security Council if they need to, or if they feel like they're stopping them from doing good. But having a second voice to tell them if they're going too far is never a bad thing, and that's specifically what Tony wants. Even if his core philosophy is functionally removing people's freedoms and putting a suit of armor on the world, he still politically thinks that it's acceptable for these people to come in and tell them, or at least ask them, to do something when they might not want to. Cap's argument as to why they shouldn't do this is basically Batman's from JLA dealing with the same issues, but Cap almost signs on because of Bucky getting treatment.
What about Wanda?
She's fine. She's confined to the compound currently. Vision's keeping her company.
Oh, God, Tony, every time I think you
It's
see
100
things the right
acres
way.
with a lap pool. It's got a screening room. There's worse ways to protect people.
Protection. Is that how you see this? This is protection? It's internment,
She's
Tony.
not a U.S. citizen, and they
Oh,
don't
come
grant
on,
visas
Tony.
to weapons of mass destruction.
She's a kid.
Give me a break! I'm doing what has to be done to stave off something worse.
True! Everything he does in Civil War always revolves and comes back to Bucky in some way. He ultimately betrays everyone in the present for Bucky who's in the past. Regardless of the people that join him, even if everyone in that room told him he was wrong, he was never going to go against Bucky and was fully willing to be a fugitive of the world and try to drag the Avengers down that road with him. His last line of defense after Tony dismantled every argument he's had throughout the entirety of the movie, and the reason why he betrayed everyone, was because Bucky is his friend. And Iron Man says so was I, because Steve betrayed Iron Man to protect Bucky when he likely didn't need to, something I'll get into later. Iron Man is correct in every logistical way, and morally too, about the Accords. Wanda, a non-American citizen, killed an entire building full of innocent civilians in an unsanctioned military operation from people headquartered in the United States. That's a political nightmare for the US because it's an international incident that the US has no political way to maneuver around in, but are forced to take responsibility of since it's their citizens, which is why the government officials of the US are the people that are giving the Avengers the sit down that we see in the movie. Wanda isn't a US citizen, and being put in a penthouse instead of a prison as justice for the lives that she took, something that that country is entitled to, unfortunate circumstances or not, is fine and good and way better than what Tony could have done, which would be handing her over to the international courts. Iron Man, at every stage of this movie, is dealing with a political nightmare and the consequences of it, and is actively making the best logistical plays that he can. He doesn't know that he's being manipulated in this movie, but ignoring that, the initial conflict of the movie being the Avengers categorized as a PMC group that have world-ending superpowers while being headquartered and functionally protected by the most powerful country in the world is compelling enough to run its own movie, and that's exactly the problem that Iron Man has to solve in this movie. The government's wanting some level of control or checks and balances on the entirety of what the Avengers even are makes sense, and anyone willing to say no to that proposition would logistically mean that the Avengers would be fugitives in their own home country and the world, potentially sparking an X-Men storyline where the governments are in an arms race to realistically neutralize each member of the team and imprison them for trying to be a globalized military organization that doesn't recognize borders or the sovereignty of any other nation. That is a problem. And this is just kind of what Tony has to deal with, politically speaking. Now, again, most of what I'm talking about isn't necessarily pointed at in the movie, but the problems that Tony is trying to solve are these core issues, even if they aren't necessarily spoken about directly by the film. And Tony is still trying to be like what the Avengers are, which is an organization that doesn't care about anybody else's sovereignty, by saying that at least they'll have one hand on the wheel, meaning that they can crash the car if necessary. Tony is making the best diplomatic decision given the circumstances and is still willing to choose the option I just mentioned earlier, but only as a last resort. Steve is only going against this because he knows that the governments of the world want to lock Bucky up for the bad things he's done, regardless of if this particular case of him blowing up a diplomat is him being innocent and being framed by Zemo. Cap chooses Bucky over the Avengers and knew that Bucky killed Tony's mom and hid that. Had Tony not have heard this from Zemo and wasn't in the shock of the moment and was just told by his fucking second in command that Bucky killed his mom and his dad, and didn't have his second in command lie to him immediately after it was revealed, then Tony would have likely given Bucky the help he offered when he knew that Bucky was brainwashed earlier in the movie as well. It's not like Tony somehow believes that the thousands of innocents that the Winter Soldier likely killed don't matter. It's just that in the moment, he was just told that his mom was killed by the guy right in front of him, and his closest friend in his life has been lying to him since the Winter Soldier film. But Tony doesn't know how long Steve has been sitting on this information. To him, it could be weeks, it could be days, it could even be hours, or it could be years. So how else would you expect him to act? And we know that Tony 100% would have let Bucky get the psychiatric treatment that he needed because he doesn't actively seek retribution for what happened in this movie at the end, either because the writers are shit at their job or the character reflected off screen. And I don't care if Bucky is in Wakanda because we know that Tony has ways of tracking movements within the Earth and abnormalities in the Earth because of what we saw in Iron Man 2 whenever he was placing the cable and checking if everything was stable. And he can literally find anyone due to his own spy network. Now, it might not be possible for him to get in there and kill Bucky and whatnot, but it definitely would be interesting to have him, a globally recognized agent of an independent military organization, barter with the Wakandans, since we know that they too feel a very certain type of way about demanding retribution for something precious that was lost. I'm not saying that they'd hand over Bucky, but an exchange of dialogue where he tries to convince them, saying that he knew that they had killed intruders on their land and that his mother was as sacred to him them as their land is would just very much be interesting. Maybe even have him entertain the idea of killing their king, showing to them that they'd surely seek retribution for that, and maybe, you know, have some people be like, yeah, why do we even care about this foreign national in our country? We have no allegiance to this guy. Let the American take him. And then we could have T'Challa say that vengeance is consuming him, the lesson that he learned in Civil War, and he goes on a much better arc in Civil War than his own movie, but let him say that vengeance is consuming Tony, and that he lost his father to Zemo, and that he ultimately let him rot in prison, and that Zemo did everything within his right mind, unlike the Winter Soldier. I think these concepts would be way more interesting than what we got. But as far as the decisions that Tony makes in this movie, I think he's right. The point is, Iron Man was put into a box by grief and the entire world's political environment demanding a response. Many people say Ross's examples of them being reckless weren't actually good nor their fault, but I disagree. I think it was there to show that they as a force can be destructive and that they need to have some form of chain of command that isn't themselves, because they are capable of leveling entire cities if not kept in check. And now you could say that the examples don't necessarily prove that, since a lot of the reasons besides Ultron and what happened in Sokovia were not technically their fault. The point is to show that the Avengers are capable of this, and it scares the world. Not necessarily saying that they have fucked up and that they have a track record of fucking up, unlike in the comics, but in the totality of what the MCU is as its own thing, it 100% makes sense why the world governments would see an unsanctioned military organization capable of leveling cities not have any sort of power dynamics with the rest of the world, and being scared about that. And again, it's not entirely true in the sense that they do actually level cities in the movies, besides Age of Ultron. But from his point of view, the fact that they can makes them dangerous, which is just true innately. Especially when the team literally answers to no one, and America has to take on the political attacks when they do fuck up. Tony, as the political figurehead of the Avengers, had to do something, and the best option was to, at the very least, lie to the governments to make them think that they'll capitulate to demands of a chain of command. Steve being a massive piece of shit by lying to Tony and single-handedly tearing the Avengers apart over refusing to let go of his past is just irrefutable. He broke up the Avengers, not Iron Man. Agreeing to the Accords ultimately means nothing and is a political decision, because whether they listen to governments or not comes down to Tony anyway and the rest of the team, because ultimately all they have to do is just say no, we're not going to do that. And what can the governments do besides cause another political debate and cause another political issue? Because we're basically back at square one anyway, which is why they haven't really addressed Civil War in any kind of meaningful way since, you know, it came out, because you're basically at the start of the film if they do decide not to sign them or not agree to the demands. Even though I do think that a TV show talking about the ramifications of the Sokovia Accords and what it means to go against every single world's governments, but the writers are just not talented enough to do that at Marvel. They can't even write the fucking Punisher correctly. Do you think that they could fucking handle political concepts like this? I can't even explain it properly, let alone fucking write about it. They definitely couldn't do either. Tony literally says this to them, though. Tony literally says, we can just say no if we want to, and he, at several points in this movie, literally tells Ross to go fuck himself because he has one hand on the fucking wheel. I feel like inadvertently, the movie proves Tony to be correct just by every single action Tony takes. Not because it's like hypocritical, but because this was always Tony's position. But, you know, I'm done. I think I've proven more than enough. If you enjoyed this video, then subscribe. I upload at least twice a week. Watch the Baldur's Gate 3 review for more interesting hot takes that I do while I work on the next big review, which will be Skyrim, a game that I haven't played before and might have some interesting takes on. I haven't started the playthrough yet. I've got other videos lined up and I've got schoolwork that I have to do. However, definitely leave some material if you want me to review it in the comments. Maybe go over some more aspects of the MCU since these videos do strikingly well compared to my other content. More games than movies, please.